The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with a frequency that only the exhausted seemed to hear. Elias Thorne stood near a pillar, away from the flow of foot traffic, counting the crumpled bills in his wallet. $38. That was what remained of his discretionary budget for the next 2 weeks. He looked down at his daughter, Lily, who was 6 years old and clutching a stuffed rabbit that had lost one eye and most of its ear fuzz. She was asleep on top of their singular, battered-ended suitcase, her small body curled into a question mark. Elias adjusted the sleeves of his gray hoodie. It was clean, but the cuffs were fraying, threads hanging loose like the unraveling edges of his life. He hadn't shaved in 3 days, not a style choice, but a strict economic decision to stretch the life of his disposable razors. At 36, he still had the broad shoulders and upright posture of a man who had once commanded millions of dollars of machinery, but his eyes were shadowed, carrying the weight of a widower who had spent the last 3 years fighting to keep a roof over his daughter's head. "Daddy," Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Are we going on the big plane now?" "Soon, bug," Elias said, his voice dropping to that gentle rumble reserved only for her. "Just a little longer. Do you want a pretzel from the bag?" "No, I want the juice. The red one." Elias hesitated. The red juice was $4.50 at the airport kiosk. He nodded. "Okay, let me go get it. You guard the bag." As he walked toward the kiosk, the crowd parted, not out of respect, but out of the subconscious avoidance people practice when they see someone who looks like they might ask for spare change. Elias was used to it. He was the invisible demographic, the struggling single father, the man who looked like he'd taken a few too many hits from life. He was waiting in line behind a woman who smelled of expensive vanilla and sharp ambition. She was on her phone, her voice carrying the crisp, imperious tone of someone who signed checks rather than cashed them. "I don't care what the logistics report says, Marcus," she snapped into her sleek smartphone. "If the merger isn't finalized by Monday, heads will roll. And book me the car for London. I don't want to wait." This was Julianne Vane. At 34, she was the youngest CFO in her sector, a woman who wore armor made of Italian silk and tailored blazers. She glanced back as Elias stepped closer, her eyes sweeping over his faded hoodie, his work boots, and the tired lines of his face. The assessment took less than a second. Unsuccessful, irrelevant, probably flying standby or economy saver. She turned back to the cashier, her posture stiffening as if his poverty might be contagious. "Keep the change," she told the cashier, grabbing her $9 sparkling water and striding away without a backward glance. Elias stepped up. "Just a cranberry juice, please." He counted out the exact change, careful not to drop the dimes. As he walked back to Lily, he saw an elderly woman struggling to lift a heavy carry-on onto a bench near their gate. People streamed past her, heads down, glued to their phones. The woman's arms were shaking, her face flushed. Without a thought, Elias diverted his path. He set the juice down and gently took the handle of the bag. "Let me get that for you, ma'am." With a fluid, effortless motion that belied his tired appearance, he hoisted the heavy bag onto the bench. It was the kind of functional strength that came from years of physical discipline, hidden now under layers of cheap cotton. "Oh, bless you, young man." The woman gasped, adjusting her glasses. She looked at him, really looked at him, past the stubble and the hoodie. "You have kind eyes. You remind me of my son." "Happy to help," Elias smiled. It was a rare, genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look 10 years younger. "Is that your little girl over there?" she asked, gesturing to Lily. "That's my world," Elias replied softly. "She's lucky." The woman patted his arm. "A father who stops to help an old lady is a father who raises good children. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." Elias felt a lump in his throat. He nodded, grabbed the juice, and returned to Lily, unaware that Julianne Vane had watched the entire exchange from the priority boarding line, a flicker of unreadable emotion crossing her face before she dismissed it and returned to her emails. The Boeing 777 was a beast of engineering, a machine Elias knew intimately. He knew the drag coefficient of the wings, the thrust rating of the GE90 engines, and the exact hydraulic pressure required to actuate the rudder. But today, he didn't know the flight deck. He knew row 34, seats B and C. "Welcome aboard," the flight attendant said, her smile straining at the edges as she glanced at Elias's boarding pass. Economy is to the right, all the way back. Elias held Lily's hand as they walked down the aisle. They passed through the hallowed ground of business class. He saw Julianne Vane settling into seat 2A, accepting a glass of champagne. She had already taken off her blazer, revealing a silk blouse. She didn't look up as he passed. The curtain was pulled shut behind them, separating the haves from the have-nots. "Daddy, why are their seats so big?" Lily whispered. "Because they paid extra for legroom, bug," Elias whispered back. "But we have the best view. We're right over the wing. We can watch the flaps move." They squeezed into their seats. The economy cabin was packed, smelling of stale coffee and humanity. Elias helped Lily buckle in, tucking the one-eared rabbit into the seatbelt with her. "I miss Mommy," Lily said suddenly, out of nowhere. The words hit Elias like a physical blow. Sarah had been gone for 4 years. A car accident, a drunk driver, a random Tuesday that ended the life they had built. Elias had left the Air Force 3 months later, unable to reconcile the risks of his job with the need to be the sole protector of his daughter. He had traded the cockpit for construction sites, for warehouse shifts, for anything that kept him on the ground and home by dinner. "I know, baby." Elias kissed her forehead. "She's watching us. She loves flying, remember? She's probably sitting on a cloud right outside the window." The plane pushed back. The engines spooled up, a deep, resonant whine that made Elias's heart ache with a phantom limb sensation. He closed his eyes as the G-force pushed him back into the seat. For a moment, he wasn't a poor single dad. He was Captain Thorne, callsign Spectre, climbing through the angels. Then the chimes sounded, the seatbelt sign flickered, and he opened his eyes to see the plastic tray table and the knee of the passenger behind him digging into his spine. 3 hours into the flight, over the dark, churning expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the world changed. It didn't start with turbulence. It started with a sound, a dull, concussive thump that vibrated through the floorboards, followed instantly by a sickening yaw to the left. Elias sat up straight, his instincts screaming before his conscious mind could catch up. Compressor stall. No, worse. Asymmetric thrust. Then came the drop. The plane plummeted, not a gentle glide, but a terrifying, stomach-churning freefall. Screams erupted throughout the economy cabin. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like rubber snakes. Lily woke up screaming, "Daddy, I've got you." Elias grabbed her, shielding her body with his own, his eyes locked on the window. The horizon was tilting violently. The plane was banking hard, too hard. The intercom crackled. It wasn't the calm, reassured voice of the captain. It was a breathless, terrified voice. "Senior flight attendant to the cockpit. Immediately. Is there a doctor on board?" The plane shuddered, leveling out slightly but vibrating intensely. The air in the cabin felt thin, heavy with the scent of ozone and fear. A moment later, the voice returned, sounding on the verge of tears. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first officer. We have a medical emergency in the flight deck. The captain is incapacitated. I need assistance." The silence that followed was heavier than the screams. Then, the first officer's voice came back, cracking with panic. "If there is anyone on board with commercial flight experience, anyone with a pilot's license, please identify yourself to the crew. Now." Chaos broke out. People were praying, crying, texting loved ones on phones that had no signal. Elias unbuckled his seatbelt. "Daddy, don't go." Lily grabbed his hoodie, her knuckles white. Elias turned to her. He cupped her face, his hands steady. "Lily, look at me. Look at Daddy. I need to go help them drive the plane. Okay? I'm going to make sure we're safe. I promise." "You promise?" Tears streamed down her face. "I swear on Mommy. Stay with Mr. Rabbit. Be brave." He stood up. The aisle was blocked by a beverage cart that had rolled loose. He shoved it aside. A flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah who looked no older than 22, was rushing down the aisle, her face pale. "I'm a pilot," Elias said, his voice cutting through the noise. It wasn't a question. It was a command. She stopped, looking him up and down. The hoodie, the boots, the desperate vibe. She hesitated. "Sir, we need a commercial pilot. Someone who knows. I flew C-17 Globemasters and F-15s for the Air Force for 12 years, Elias said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I have 4,000 flight hours. Get me to the front." She blinked, the authority in his voice overriding her visual assessment. "Follow me." They ran toward the front. As they passed through business class, Julianne Vane was standing in the aisle, clutching her phone, looking terrified. She saw Elias running behind the flight attendant. Him. Julianne blocked the path, her voice shrill with panic. You're taking him to the cockpit? The guy who couldn't afford a juice box. Elias didn't stop. He didn't have time for her classism. Move, he growled. This is insane. Julianne shouted at the flight attendant. You can't let a vagrant fly the plane. He's probably drunk. Look at him. Elias stopped. He turned to Julianne, invading her personal space. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. My daughter is in row 34. There are 300 people on this boat. If you don't get out of my way, you are killing all of them. Sit down. The intensity in his eyes was terrifying. It was the look of a predator, a protector, something ancient and dangerous. Julianne shrank back, falling into her seat. Elias stormed into the cockpit. The scene inside was a nightmare. Captain Miller was slumped over the center console, blood matting his silver hair. He had been thrown forward during the initial violent turbulence, striking his head on the instrument panel. The first officer, a young man named Ricky, was wrestling with the yoke. He was hyperventilating, his eyes wide and unseeing. Status. Elias barked as he strapped himself into the captain's seat. He didn't ask for permission. He took the chair like it was a throne he had abdicated but never forgotten. I don't. Ricky stammered. We lost the number 2 engine. Debris impact. The vibration. I think the mounting is damaged. And the captain. Elias scanned the instruments. His brain, dormant for 4 years, woke up with a vengeance. It was like riding a bike, if the bike was on fire and moving at 500 miles per hour. Hydraulics are degrading, Elias muttered, his eyes darting across the ICA's display. We're losing pressure in the yellow system. Ricky, listen to me. He reached over and grabbed the first officer's shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise. Breathe. I have the aircraft. You're going to work the radios and the checklists. Do you understand? Ricky nodded, swallowing hard. Yes. Yes, sir. Who are you? Ricky asked, seeing the hoodie. I'm the guy who's going to get you on the ground. Feather number 2. Let's secure the engine before it shakes the wing off. For the next 20 minutes, Elias was a machine. He stabilized the aircraft, running through emergency checklists from memory before Ricky could even find the page. He spoke to air traffic control with a calm, bored precision that belied the terror of the situation. Control, this is United 998. Mayday. Engine failure. Captain incapacitated. Requesting immediate vectors to nearest suitable airfield. United 998. Nearest is St. John's, Newfoundland. But the weather is deteriorating. Heavy snow, crosswinds at 40 knots. Elias looked at the fuel gauge. They had dumped fuel to lighten the load, but with the drag from the damaged engine and the lower altitude, they were burning fast. We're going in, Elias said. The cabin was silent. The screaming had stopped, replaced by a terrified, prayerful hush. In business class, Julianne Vane stared at the flight map on the screen. The plane was descending. The man, the one she had mocked, the one she had called a vagrant, was the only thing standing between her and a cold, watery grave. She felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the turbulence. She thought about her merger, her bonus, her designer shoes. All of it seemed suddenly, violently absurd. She thought about the little girl in economy. He's fighting for her, she realized. He's not fighting for me. He's fighting for the child I ignored. In the cockpit, the workload was immense. The hydraulics were sluggish. The plane responded to Elias's inputs with a delay, wallowing in the air like a wounded whale. Visuals are 0, Ricky called out. We're flying blind. ILS is captured. Crosswind is pushing us right. Elias gritted his teeth, wrestling the yoke. His forearms, hidden beneath the hoodie, bulged with effort. I need you to call out speed. Don't let me get below 140. 145, 142. Speed is decaying. I know. Elias pushed the throttle of the remaining engine. It whined in protest. Come on, sweetheart. Hold together. The runway lights of St. John's appeared out of the driving snow like a string of pearls in the abyss. They were coming in too fast and crabbed sideways at a 30-degree angle to fight the wind. Too hot. We're too hot. Ricky yelled. We can't go around, Elias said, his voice deadly calm. We have one shot. Brace. He keyed the intercom one last time. Cabin crew, brace for impact. Elias kicked the rudder pedal, swinging the nose of the massive jet straight at the last second. He cut the power. The 777 slammed onto the runway. It wasn't a graceful touchdown. It was a controlled crash. The tires screamed, smoke billowing. 2 tires on the main gear blew out instantly with sounds like cannon fire. The plane shuddered, threatening to skid off the icy tarmac into the snowbanks. Elias fought the controls, pumping the brakes, using the thrust reverser on the single good engine. The plane bucked, slid, and groaned. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" Elias whispered. The nose gear dipped as the plane finally ground to a halt, feet from the end of the runway lights. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Then, from the back of the plane, a sound started. A clap, then another, then a roar of cheering that vibrated through the cockpit door. Ricky slumped in his seat, sobbing. "We're alive. Oh God, we're alive." Elias unbuckled his harness. His hands were shaking now. The adrenaline dump was hitting him. He didn't celebrate. He stood up on legs that felt like jelly. "Check on the captain," he ordered quietly. "Get the paramedics on board." He opened the cockpit door. Elias stepped out into the galley. He looked like a wreck. Sweat had soaked through his gray hoodie. His hair was plastered to his forehead. The flight attendants were crying, hugging each other. When they saw him, they froze. Then, the applause from the cabin swelled again. Elias ignored it. He walked down the aisle, past the stunned faces of the first-class passengers. Julianne Vane was standing there. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the exhaustion, the raw power, the undeniable competence. She saw the man she had judged as worthless, who had just performed a miracle. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias didn't stop. He didn't gloat. He didn't wait for her apology. He walked straight past her, through the curtain, into the economy section. "Daddy!" The scream pierced the air. Lily had unbuckled and was standing on her seat. Elias broke into a run. He scooped her up, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the smell of her strawberry shampoo. He fell to his knees in the aisle, clutching her as if she were the only solid thing in the universe. "I came back," he choked out, tears finally spilling over his grime-streaked cheeks. "I promised. I came back." Around them, the passengers in economy, the people in jeans and t-shirts, the grandmothers and students, reached out to touch his shoulder, to pat his back, weeping gratitude. "That's the man," the elderly woman from the airport said loudly, wiping her eyes. "That's the good father." The next 12 hours were a blur of flashing lights, paramedics, and officials. Because of the weather and the investigation, the passengers were put up in the finest hotel in St. John's, paid for by the airline. Elias and Lily were escorted not to a standard room, but to the presidential suite. The airline rep, looking terrified of a lawsuit, couldn't do enough for them. "Mr. Thorne, please, anything you need. Room service is unlimited. We have clothes being sent up for you and your daughter." Elias stood in the middle of the luxurious living room, holding a sleeping Lily. He looked at the marble fireplace, the chandelier, the view of the snowy city. It was a stark contrast to his one-bedroom apartment with the leaky faucet. He laid Lily in the massive king-sized bed, tucking Mr. Rabbit in beside her. He went into the bathroom, stripped off his sweat-stained clothes, and stood under the rainfall shower for 30 minutes, letting the hot water wash away the fear. When he emerged, wearing a plush hotel robe, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Julianne Vane. She was holding a bottle of aged scotch and 2 glasses. She had changed into casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater she must have bought at the hotel gift shop. She looked smaller, softer, her armor gone. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice lacked its usual command. It was humble. Elias stepped aside. She walked in and set the bottle on the table. She poured 2 drinks with shaking hands. "I need a drink, and I think you earned the whole bottle." She handed him a glass. Elias took it, but didn't drink. He watched her. "I'm sorry," Julianne said. She looked him in the eye, her expression pained. "I was awful. I judged you. I insulted you. I almost stopped you from saving our lives because I didn't like your hoodie." "You were scared," Elias said quietly. "Fear makes people ugly." "No." Julianne shook her head. "I wasn't just scared. I was arrogant. I thought money made me better than you. I thought my suit made me important." She took a long swallow of the scotch. "When I saw you walk out of that cockpit, when I saw you run to your daughter, I felt like the smallest person on earth. She looked at him, her eyes searching. Who are you, Elias? Really? I'm just a dad, he said, taking a sip of the amber liquid. It burned pleasantly. I used to be a pilot. Then my wife died, and I had to be a mom and a dad. Flying didn't fit anymore. You're a hero, she said. No. Heroes are the ones who don't come back. I'm just a survivor. Julian stepped closer. The air between them was charged, not just with gratitude, but with a sudden, raw intimacy born of shared trauma. She reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm. You saved me, she whispered. I don't have anyone, Elias. I have employees. I have shareholders. But if that plane went down, no one would have missed me. Not really. Not the way that little girl missed you. Tears welled in her eyes. It was a moment of absolute vulnerability. Elias could see the loneliness beneath her success. You're alive, Elias said gently, not pulling his hand away, but keeping the boundary respectful. That means you have a second chance. To change that. She looked at him, and for a second, he thought she might lean in. The tension was thick, a magnetic pull between the high-powered executive and the rugged protector. But Elias stepped back slightly, glancing toward the bedroom where Lily slept. I need to check on her, he said. Julian nodded, understanding. She wiped her eyes and finished her drink. Right. Of course. She placed a business card on the table. It was heavy, embossed gold. This is my personal number. And my lawyer's. Not to sue you, she added quickly with a weak laugh. But to help. Whatever you need. A job. A house. A reference. Anything. Call me. She paused at the door. Thank you, Captain Thorne. The next morning, Elias couldn't leave the hotel. The lobby was swarming with reporters. The hero in the hoodie, the headline screamed. Mystery Dad saves Flight 998. A meeting was organized in the hotel ballroom. The passengers insisted on it. When Elias walked in, holding Lily's hand, the room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous, foot-stomping ovation. People were crying. Captain Miller, his head bandaged, was there in a wheelchair. He waved Elias over. You have a hell of a touch, son, the old captain said, gripping Elias's hand. You saved my ship. You saved my soul. Then, a young man stood up. It was the tech entrepreneur who had been sitting in 34A. Mr. Thorne, the man said, his voice shaking. We talked last night. All of us. We know things haven't been easy for you. Elias stiffened. I didn't do it for a reward. We know, the man smiled. That's why we want to give you one. We started a GoFundMe page last night while we were waiting for luggage. It went viral. He projected a screen onto the ballroom wall. Fund for the hero dad of Flight 998 total raised. $845,000. Elias's knees nearly gave out. He stared at the number. That was a house. That was Lily's college. That was freedom. And Julianne Vane stepped forward, taking the microphone. She looked composed again, but her eyes were warm when they met Elias's. My company, Vane Dynamics, has a corporate aviation division. We need a director of safety and training. It pays $200,000 a year. It's a ground job. 9 to 5. No deployments. Full benefits. She extended a hand. The job is yours if you want it, Elias. Elias looked at the money. He looked at Julianne. Then he looked down at Lily, who was looking up at him with wide, proud eyes. Daddy, are we rich? She whispered loudly. The room laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. Elias knelt down. We're rich because we have each other, Bug. But yeah, we're going to be okay. We're really going to be okay. He stood up and looked at the crowd. I don't know what to say. Half of this money, he pointed to the screen, goes to Captain Miller. For his medical bills and his retirement. He flew you for 30 years safely. Don't forget that. Captain Miller sobbed openly. The rest, Elias's voice cracked. The rest is for Lily. 3 months later, Elias stood on the porch of a small, beautiful house in the suburbs. The grass was green, and there was a swing set in the back. He was wearing a suit, not an expensive one, but it fit well. He shaved every day now. A black car pulled up. Julian got out. She visited sometimes. They weren't dating. Not yet, but there was a slow, burning friendship that hinted at more. She brought a bottle of wine and a new toy for Lily. Ready for the board meeting, Director Thorne? She teased. Ready as I'll ever be, Elias smiled. Lily ran out of the house, chasing a golden retriever puppy they had adopted last week. Daddy, look, He caught the ball. Elias watched them run. He thought about the cold nights in the airport. He thought about the fear in the cockpit. He thought about the woman who had looked down on him, who now stood on his lawn looking at him like he was the sun. He had walked through the fire. He had kept his promise. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He wasn't just a poor single dad. He was Elias Thorne. And he was home.